Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to Lean Manufacturing Techniques. We're so happy to have you all joining us. And before we get into the material and before I introduce our presenter today, I want to just go over a few logistics. So we will be recording this presentation and sending it out in a follow-up email with a link to the recording, so you can access it at a later date if need be. We have also enabled our questions feature. So if you go to the right-hand tab of your GoToWebinar panel, there's a gray questions tab. Feel free to type in your questions there anytime throughout the presentation, and we can get to some during the presentation and others at the end during our question and answer session. So I'm Hannah Curtis. I'm a coordinator with the North Metro SBDC, and I'm so excited to introduce our presenter today, John Jaggers, lead consultant with SBDC and has years of experience in manufacturing. So who better to teach us about these lean manufacturing techniques? John, I will turn it over to you now.
Oh, Hannah, thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity to share some lean ideas. My background, if you don't know who I am, 25 plus years of manufacturing, working with primarily large companies. But and with those companies, I was very fortunate to be able to learn lean techniques and actually be lean certified through several of them. So I know that the principles that we're going to talk about today are going to be something that works and hopefully something that you can apply to your operation. So I've also, Hannah alluded to it, that I've got 6 years of experience with SBDC and Manufacturer's Edge. And during that time, I've probably had 100 plus clients, many of them manufactured, but not all of them. Some retail, some nonprofit. And even although this is focused on lean manufacturing, some of these lean principles can apply to any type of organization. So if any of you are not manufacturers, you're welcome to learn a few things, hopefully. So, okay. Go ahead to the first slide. So the term, if you're not aware, the term Muda is any activity that absorbs resources and creates no value. So from a customer standpoint, they only look for those things that add value to whatever it is that they are consuming, and they don't care about all the other things that go on in the background to make a product in our service. So go ahead and so today we're going to talk about several different lean techniques. There are many lean techniques, and we won't get into all of them, but I think the ones that we're going to talk about are the ones that I've used in the past and seem to apply universally to manufacturing. So, and I'll try to, I've got some illustrations and pictures and drawings of some good examples of each one of these techniques that'll hopefully help you and give you a good idea of what it looks like. And then really the beauty of lean is that all it doesn't require any capital investment. It just requires some training from management and some input from employees. And this is a very key point. Your best ideas are going to come from your employees. You're going to hear me say this 10 times throughout this presentation when we talk about the different techniques. So that's something to keep in mind, whether you got 1 employee or 20 employees. Having a methodology for them to contribute ideas and eliminate waste is very important. Okay, now. So there are a bunch of different types of waste that we're going to talk about. So motion, waiting, defects, non-utilized talent, and inventory control. There are Go ahead, one more.
Mm.
There are a couple others. Yeah, go to the graph. There are a couple others that are not necessarily just applied to manufacturing. We're not going to talk about them today. So, but you can see on the little graph that there's like 8 different ways that you can waste. So I think that's important. So the first one we're going to talk about is motion. Really, it's very straightforward. It's unnecessary movement of people, equipment, or machinery. And go ahead. And believe it or not, it includes walking, lifting, reaching, bending, stretching, and moving. So it's any kind of motion that is wasted. And then, so tasks that require excess motion can be redesigned, and we're going to talk about some of the tools that will help you do that. And not only creates efficiency, but also helps the health, safety, and fatigue of your employees. So go ahead. So here's a little illustration of the guy putting together some materials and moving around. It goes from his tool cart to the empty boxes to the parts to the cart, back and forth, back and forth. And it could be laid out a whole lot more efficiently with just a little bit of work. I call that mess there on the floor a spaghetti diagram. He's moving back and forth and wasting a lot of time. So that's motion. Waiting. So waiting it's very straightforward, but in a manufacturing operation, it's very key. So it's people waiting on materials or equipment, and it's idle equipment. And the way you get around that is from a standpoint of stringent schedules, standardized work instructions, and developing and training multi-skilled workers. So one of the keys in production is having a very, very strong schedule that is not just put in place, but is communicated well. And I spent a lot of time with my manufacturing folks, clients, talking about schedules and making sure that they have meetings with their key players at the beginning of the week, what the schedule looks like. And then I always suggest to have a huddle at the beginning of each work shift to talk about this is what we're going to accomplish, and that helps tremendously from eliminating the waiting. So, and then there's defects. Those are any order that's not 100% to quality standards, and a lot of times, hold on one second, sorry. A lot of times it's assumed that, well, we'll let QC take care of those defects down the line or before they're packaged. And that's not the case. That should not be the case. Really, your operators are your QC, so they are the ones that are observing good and bad product. So the way you get around that is really design a process that is repetitive and that will create a first-time yield. So where you can make sure that where you make sure that any abnormalities are worked out of the process, and that standardized work is developed. And we're going to talk about standardized work quite a bit during this presentation. So you want to have, in manufacturing, you want to have what's called a first-time yield, meaning that all the steps you go through, you end up with a product at the end that is top quality. So one more. I think I talked about, yeah, okay. So standardized work. Okay, let's move on. The next type of waste is inventory, and a lot of times when I deal with clients, they don't think about their inventory, but their inventory is cash dollars that will inhibit their cash flow. And in today's world, as you all know, cash flow is extremely important. I mean, most of you are probably not getting the level of sales that you would have gotten in the past. Hopefully you are, but cash flow is really, really critical. So keeping the inventory under control uh, is very, very important. Having excess inventory is just uh, unnecessary expenditure, but having sufficient inventory on the flip side, you can go a couple more slides, couple more, yeah, there you go. And then, but having sufficient inventory is important to make sure that that schedule that you put together is in balance. So it's a balancing act for sure. Uh, when we look at Kanbans here in a second, that is a inventory related tool. So we'll talk about that. And I'm sure most of you have heard of just in time. Just in time is really just having the parts and materials ready to go when you're going to produce that next product. So, okay. And then this last one, which I think is a very big one, is underutilized talent. In other words, your staff is not trained to the level where they are optimum, and there's a lot of ways to provide that training, but also they are engaged from a standpoint of using their knowledge and expertise to improve the process. And we will talk in detail as to how to do that. The key is that those employees that are doing the work are the ones that are the most capable of identifying and developing solutions. And they just have to be given the forum and the opportunity to do that. So, Hannah, I noticed a question popped up. Can you?
Yes. Yeah, we do. A couple questions. This first one is, what steps do you suggest employees take to identify specific examples of waste that can be corrected?
Okay, we covered the different types of waste, and typically what I do when I go through this presentation with clients and their employees, I'll go through the whole thing because they're going to learn some other tools that are applicable to how to eliminate waste. However, in a forum where you go through and explain the types of waste and then challenge them, each one of them, to provide a example or an opportunity in their own work area. And typically I do the presentation, then I come back around a week later and say, okay, I've given you a week to find just one example of what's a waste opportunity. And typically they will find something in their area that is a good opportunity. And so again, it's input. It's the form that you provide and the input that employees will provide. Okay.
Yeah, great. That's really helpful. And then would you recommend that that be documented for follow-up by management?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So during that meeting with the employees, the training, and then the second meeting, you need to have someone in respectable person in management that, of course, all management is respectable, right? Kidding, of course, but having someone that will facilitate and capture those ideas and put them on a action register. And the real key is that if they provide an idea that they feel like is a improvement opportunity, that if in fact management feels like that's a doable action, they move ahead and get it done. And then they have a follow-up meeting. Like typically I have a follow-up meeting like a month later and go through those actions that were put into place. What that does is provide buy-in from the employee standpoint that management did listen to what I have to say. They tried it, and guess what? That was my idea, and it worked. And so that makes them really feel good about what they've done. And that's a continual process. So not to say that there'll be some ideas that are very easy to implement, and there's others that'll take some time, and there's some others that may not have merit. Okay, they're just too convoluted or just are not going to have impact. But it's very, very important to be open and honest about that from a standpoint of, okay, well, we don't feel that's going to work. Maybe we'll try at a later date or whatever. So, okay.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Those are our questions for now, so I think we're good to keep going here.
Okay. All right. So then moving on, we're going to talk about the Kanban Staging, Visual Factory, 5S Techniques, and Kaizen Events. And these are 4 different types of lean tools that can be applied to your operation. They're all fairly simple, but they all have a little different approach. So starting out with the Kanban, and really what a Kanban is it's a lean system of feeding parts and materials in an organized fashion. And so it provides easy access of materials to the operator. So we saw that guy moving around, and he was doing a lot of spaghetti movement. But if his parts and materials and everything had been organized, it could have gone in a much more methodical way. So I've seen some clients that when they have parts that are fed to the operators to be barcoded, and that way they can restock and know exactly where they're at, or they use what's called replenishment cards. So you're going to see an example here in a second of what that looks like, but it's basically feeding material so your operators have minimum movement and minimum fatigue. So put one more in. So this one more. Yeah, go to the next one. There you go. So this is a shot that I took of one of my clients. They have all their parts set in order from a standpoint of feeding. You can't see him, but there's an operator right behind this guy, and they just grab parts and build whatever they're building based on that organization. And what the inventory control person is doing is actually scanning the barcodes on each one of those parts. That way they keep track of what's being used. So pretty not difficult, but it's a very effective technique. So okay, go ahead. So the other next technique is called visual factory, and what it says there, it creates visual cues which execute well that indicate a status, whether to standard or not to standard. And this can be many different things. But part of it also is, and I've seen here recently, that it can be visual factory can be the application of training by using monitors or training aids, and that it helps with the learning process because it's so evident what needs to be done. And we'll see an example of that here in a second. Yeah, like I was saying, so interactive build drawings or videos are part of visual factory. And the intent is obviously to eliminate waste in real time, and real time is key when you're manufacturing things that will support the continuous process. And there are a number of different ways to have visual factory. Here's one example of this was one of my production managers in the past, and so these are the huddle boards that they would pull in the whole group of that particular part of the manufacturing and go through and say, okay, this is where we're at in production, both for the month and year to date. Here's the number of defects, and then if you look at the bottom, there are some actions of what needs to be done to correct those defects. And then off to the left, you can see for that particular part, 2532J3, which we're all familiar with that, but showing productivity, which is another by day, which is really pretty good. So again, it's just a illustration of where you're at. Here is an illustration of a interactive assembly. This gentleman is putting together parts. He is fairly new, and so he's going through. He's using the monitor to demonstrate step by step how those parts are put together. So it's a tremendous training aid, and again, part of visual factory. Okay, go ahead. This is just a simple example of a chart that can be posted and updated from a standpoint. I'm kind of proud of this chart because it's a real chart from a standpoint. I was running a plant in Georgia, and they were what's called an extruded plastic plant. So they made film for diapers. Believe it or not, that's what they were making. Huge amount, millions of pounds a week. So one of the keys, though, was because we were dealing with some very big pieces of equipment. When they had to change their schedule or change over, they were very inefficient. And if you look to the left, this is talking in hours. These are two different production lines. What we're monitoring in hours, and then you see the improvement from over the course of a year. And really, what happened here? Again, this is an illustration of visual factory, but I think it's kind of important to talk about how that happened. They actually had their changeovers became very organized. They had checklists, they had pre-meeting, the maintenance had changeover cards that had all the parts on it, ready to go. Didn't have to run back to wherever to get parts. So we went from 16 hours and 8 hours all the way down to half that amount. So it was a tremendous improvement. And so, again, it goes back to that wasted idle time. While this is all going on, they're waiting on maintenance, and the production folks are leaning on a broom, trying to look busy, but of course, I knew they weren't. So anyway, okay.
John,
So, go ahead.
We have a couple questions, and I was just gonna comment, these seem like really helpful communication tools with your employees, the visual
Absolutely.
factory.
Absolutely. They are, without a doubt.
One of the questions we got in was about the Kanban staging. Wondering if you can give some examples of how the Kanban technique of staging materials can take different forms specific to your operation, specific to different operations.
So we saw the one illustration where it was parts that were barcoded, and I should have taken a shot where it showed the equipment and the operator were right next to that. That's one way. In other different operations that I've dealt with, we put all the materials for a build on a cart and then move them right up to the operator, where again, minimal movement. And then also, one of my clients is a circuit board manufacturer. So their parts of the circuit boards are not that big, and the kits are, because they use a build of material, the kits are put together in a tray or several trays and pre-staged before they go into the manufacturing process. So again, there's no waiting. It's very organized, and there's very little wasted time from a standpoint of the operators themselves.
Great. That's really helpful. And all of this is really helpful for us to be thinking about. Looks like those are our questions for now, so we can.
Okay. So we're going to talk next about the 5S principles. You've probably heard of those. We'll go through each one of them. And I got to throw this in. My wife says that my garage looks like a 5S operation. So everything has got its place. So sorting, the first step in the 5S is that you want to eliminate unnecessary items, and there are plenty of them. Whether it's excess materials, paper, records, whatever the case may be, and old parts, you're going to find if you walk through your plant and look really hard, you're going to see all kinds of stuff that can be removed or discarded. So that's the first step. Second step is straightening. So placing equipment, parts, and tools in the best location that'll help improve efficiency and workflow. And I mean, we talked about several different things from a standpoint of the Kanban and from a standpoint of not wasting motion. All have to do with straightening. So you got to rethink in this process. You got to rethink your layout and what is the best optimal way for your operators and really your whole department to flow. So that's the straightening part. Sweeping or shining. I'm a fanatic from a standpoint of housekeeping, and so and every plant I've ever run has been very well maintained housekeeping wise. I think that it's part of this, but at the same time, I think it provides both organization and pride to your operation. That anybody can walk in and say, "Whoa, this is really well maintained and clean operation." So again, if we want to go out to my garage afterwards, you're going to see the same thing. So anyway, standardizing. This just means operating in a consistent and standard fashion, and that is really a key part of the whole operation. And so it's not necessarily just the layout that is standardized, really how you build and actually sell and build your products. I'll give you an example. I deal with a conversion van camper company. They take large cargo vans and convert them into campers. And very hot business right now because of RVs. Is I was telling Hannah yesterday, RV business is up 600%. So I've been working with them for about the last 2 years, and when I first got there, they had any type of conversion that you wanted, they would do. Okay, so which is fine when they were operating out of a garage, but now they're in a big facility and they need to have standardized builds. And so we developed from probably what was 50 different ways of building down to 6, and that still kept the customers happy because in those 6 there was upgrades as you went, and what that does is it limiting the options really helps your efficiency because you can consistently produce the same thing over and over again, even though each van is going to be a little different. At the same time, that does create some really excellent efficiency. Okay, and then the last S is sustaining the discipline. So if you go to all the trouble, and you're going to see some slides here of really how these different techniques work, if you go to all the trouble to make sure that these are done properly, then it's up to management to keep those high standards of discipline for a long period of time, and that's a challenge, without a doubt. And it takes a lot of effort from management until it really becomes a mindset to your employees. These are management's expectations. We've gone through all this effort. Let's keep it that way. So, okay. So then we're going to look at some examples. Oh no, okay. So here's just a real simple diagram. It's very straightforward. We're going through the sorting, straightening, shine, and standardized process, and then the bullet in the center, the most important point: sustaining or maintaining established procedures. That's the hard part. Okay. Go ahead. And yeah. So this is an actual shop that I had some dealings with that it was a mess. Okay. You couldn't see where anything was. And it was a safety issue. It was an efficiency issue. And so we went through some lean training, and this is the greatest example of sorting that I could come up with. You can see, it looks like there's nobody even working there, but they really are. They got all the equipment where we should be. Got some cabinets in place. Put some lines down on the floor as to where people operate, and so that's a great example of sorting. Okay, go ahead. Straightening. So this is a station where their tool placement is very, very organized. Now you wonder how do they keep everything in the same place all the time? Well, there's actually, you can't see it, but there's a little the shadow board underneath each one of those tools, and at the end of the shift, they will put the tools right back where they started from, and it's created that so they know where everything is. They don't have to go into their toolbox and spend 20 minutes finding that darn ratchet. I don't know where it is. It's there someplace. So, but and it's very simple. It's just a matter, again, it's just a matter of being organized. Okay. And the next one. This is probably the best illustration I ever came up with from the standpoint of cleanliness and shining. This is a Procter & Gamble diaper plant. Okay, so they are required to have a environment where you can basically eat off the floor. And this particular plant wasn't too far from the plant that I was running at the time, the extruded plastic. We would make extruded plastic and ship it over to this operation where they would actually make the diapers. And so I would take groups of my employees over there and say, see, this is the way we're supposed to look. And they'd all go, no, okay. But it's a great example of how good your environment can look. So, and they maintain it. I was over there probably 10 different times, and that was always looked the same. Okay. One more. Oh, no, that's good. I'm sorry. So standardization. This is an example of standardization from a standpoint of all the cleaning supplies are just thrown around. And then on this after slide, you can see that everything is marked, everything is laid out. This is where each piece of equipment goes. And again, the sustaining part of this, to get them to do it every day, every time, every shift, is a challenge. But after a while, they figure out, well, if I put it in that place, I'm going to find it quite easily. So that is a good example of it. So, did you have some questions?
Yes, sorry, I was still muted. But yeah, a question did come in. What do you suggest as an appropriate time frame to execute and complete the 5S strategy?
Okay, really, that kind of depends on how big your operation is, but I can tell you to really do it effectively, it's going to take from 2 to 3 months, because you're going to go through one phase, you're going to make sure that stays in place, you're going to go through the next phase, and it requires quite a bit of effort and time, and of course, in the meantime, you're producing product, so you got to devote some specific time to say, okay, on Friday from noon until 4, we're going to work on this part of the 5S, and then on Monday you're going to maintain it. So so it does take a couple months at least. So
that's good to know. And then a follow-up to that, what initial training is needed to motivate employees in this process?
Well, I think really nothing more than what we just went through as an explanation, but I mean, this is what I've presented is pretty simplistic, and it's gonna be more complicated from a standpoint of making sure that you have the optimum workflow in the end, and it'll take several different meetings with your employees to lay out, because they actually are the ones that need to do the work. They're the ones that are going to live in that environment. Um, but I think one of the most key points is that this is going to make their job easier. You're not going to have to waste time looking around for that tool or waiting on that material or having excess motion or you're fatigued by the end of the day. Everything's going to be laid out in a very organized manner. And that needs to be emphasized all the way through, that this is really for your betterment. Granted, it's for the efficiency of the operation, but at the same time, it's going to make your job easier. So I think that you go through the training and reinforce those facts. And I think that's what you got to do.
Great, great. Yeah,
Okay.
seems like that buy-in is pretty important, but framing it as you said, as their benefit, hopefully gets them to feel motivated and want to sustain, as you said, can be hard.
I think that's a good point, Hannah. And I've seen where, unfortunately, I've seen a couple examples where management just tried to jam this down the employees' throats, and it was good for a short while. And after a while, they went back to their old ways because they didn't think it was going to work, and they didn't have any input as to how it was supposed to be. All those things are really, again, comes around to the key that their involvement and their input is extremely important.
Sure. Great.
Okay.
Great. Well, those are our questions for now, so we can move along.
Okay. This is actually the last technique, and it's probably one of the most complex, although I think it's one of the most effective. So Kaizen events are short-term brainstorming and implementation sessions to improve an existing process. I know I read that, but that's what it is. In the case where you do have a Kaizen event, you need a facilitator, someone, hopefully in management, that is respected and knowledgeable. And those employees that are doing the work in that particular area that are working on that process improvement are the most knowledgeable participants, and they should participate. Okay. So how you go through it is that you need some type of methodology, what I call methodology. And so one of the tools that I've always used is called DMAIC, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And really what this is, it goes through the steps. Whatever you define what the problem or the opportunity is, you measure how much improvement you feel like you can make, you analyze the problem from a standpoint of what are the barriers, what are the bottlenecks that cause that problem. You brainstorm some ideas how to improve it, and then you measure again to make sure that those improvements have taken place, and then you control it by making it a procedure that will be followed. So I know that's a lot to digest, but it's really very, very simple. So, okay, go on to the next one. So I thought it was good to talk about some of the techniques that Kaizen events can be used. So again, going back to the 5S, I think it's important that you get the input from your employees as to how they feel the best way that the operation, their department, or the whole their workstation can be organized. So that's very important. And then another one, improving equipment reliability. When I ran the extruded plastic plant, I would have short Kaizen meetings with every line. We had 17 lines, but I would take, after the shift, I would take the operators offline and say, okay, let's go through this process. It's going to take a couple of weeks, but I want you to be involved, and I want to listen to your input as to how we can make your equipment more reliable and more efficient. And they jumped at the opportunity because having downtime or having equipment problems, was bothersome to them because they really wanted to produce. It's a lot easier to produce than it is to fight the battle of not having equipment that runs properly. On to the next one. Operator skill training. This is the real key, and it gets back to that waste of not having optimum operators. They can take them through the exercise, and I have taken them through exercise where they break down the skills that are required to perform a job, and then with that, they are given the training on each one of those skills. And actually, that is used quite a bit on new employees. They're given the skills matrix at the beginning, and so they know what they got to learn. And the different pay rates are based on the higher the skill level, the better their pay is. So again, it's a Kaizen event opportunity. Okay, workflow and scheduling enhancements. You would guess everything we've talked about, that if you pull together a group of employees in a specific department, how can we enhance and make sure that product is always sitting there, and how can we improve the schedule to really optimize your equipment. So, and they'll speak up given the opportunity. And yeah, application of Kanban. We talked about Kanbans. So management thinks they know it all. Well, they don't know it all. Okay. Granted, they're in a position for a reason, but if you talk to the operators and get their input in a Kaizen event, how would you like your equipment best laid out? And I worked for Kodak, and we had just put in some new automation, and so that was packaging equipment. So that automation was set up, one operator, one piece of equipment. Well, one of my employees came up to me and said, "John," I said, "you're feeding all the materials that I need to me in the back, and I sit there and watch this machine. Why don't you give me two machines?" So, oh, yes, I'll do that. So we put them side by side, fed her the materials, and she could run both of them very easily. Well, it went on for about a month. She came to me and said, "John, why don't you give me three pieces of equipment? I can sand the center. I'm going to make a cell. You can just feed me all the material." Sure enough, we parked another one in the third spot and fed her the materials that she needed all the time. It's getting triple output with one operator. Now, she was a shining example, but we soon converted all the equipment that way. So, and we actually made her a trainer for the rest of them. So anyway, back to the point, Kaizen event, it's input on the Kanbans, okay? And then the last one is technology or software. And I think it's very important in the manufacturing environment that, from a standpoint of labor control, of scheduling, of tracking orders, it's very important to use some of the latest in application software. There's some very simple ones out there that I'm not here to sell them, but I'll just tell you about them. There are what's called Kintone software, which is a labor tracking and a order tracking software that's extremely easy to use and extremely just full of information. And then there's what's called Smart Sheets, which is an order tracking software that which is just excellent, and it's very easy to use. Okay, so those are examples of Kaizen events. Again, it's just input on problem. So lean ideas should come from employees who do the work. I know you've heard me say that 10 times, but that's given the opportunity to make suggestions on reducing waste, Kanban, Visual Factory, 5S, and Kaizen events. It generates enthusiasm, and the most important point, it generates buy-in from your employees, that they are part of the process. Okay? And then at the same time, these lean techniques will eliminate waste and improve efficiency and quality, which they really will. I've seen this work many, many times. Okay. Okay, so yeah, this is a key point. So management, you can say, okay, well, we're gonna put lean into place, but if you don't provide the proper training, and you don't provide the opportunity to listen to your employees and make them part of, involved in the process, it's not going to work. Okay, I can tell you that from lots of experience. So it's really key. And the last one is, thank you for your time. So Hannah, was there any questions at the end?
Yeah, another question came in. Someone's asking if you could say a bit more about the connection between these lean techniques and safety, how it would apply to safety techniques.
That's a very good question. From a standpoint of the 5S in particular, where you go through and excess materials are removed, that the layout is most opportune, but at the same time, what has to be considered is safety issues at the same time. So you have to have good workflow, but you don't want people on top of each other, nor do you want materials that are scattered everywhere. So the Kanban feeds the operator, but it doesn't inhibit movement. The parts and materials are available, but they're not on top of them. So that's another safety feature that helps tremendously. So I would say anything on 5S has got to do with whether it's sorting, straightening, standardizing, or sustaining is so safety driven. It makes a big difference. Okay.
Great. Brandy has more of a comment. She says, using this, they decided to move their shipping department from the office to the warehouse and organize and label their shipping supplies. So yeah, she continues to look forward to other ways they can implement this training. So it's helpful, I think, to see an example of real life example of this put in place.
Terrific.
Yeah. Another question. If you have different areas in your business that you want to implement these techniques, would you recommend starting the process with all of those areas at the same time and working through each of those techniques simultaneously, or would you recommend starting with one area, carrying through the whole process, and then moving to another area in your business, starting through the whole process?
You know what? That is a great question, because I've seen that in real life, and I would suggest you do one department at a time. Take your most opportune department that you think is going to set the example for the rest of them, and go through those steps, particularly of 5S, and then you can use that as a demonstration to the rest of the departments how well this really works, and you're going to get the reinforcement of the employees who made the change and can attest to, oh my God, my job's never been this easy. This is great, and I don't feel worn out at the end of the day. So it's a great question, and then from there, just kind of pick your next opportunity, most opportune areas, and do them all. So, and again, the process takes some time. So, but set the example.
Sure.
Okay.
Great. That was really helpful. Looks like those are all our questions we have now. So everyone listening, if you have any final questions, feel free to put those in now. And for other questions or to set up a consulting appointment with John or any of our other lead consultants about these types of questions or any other types of questions related to your business, you can do that on our website, which is northmetrosbdc.com. Visit the consulting tab to set up that appointment. John, are there any last words you would like to share?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the most important thing is that lean, whether it's a manufacturing, retail, whatever your organization, it's just a very simple methodology to eliminate waste. That's very straightforward. But it only works if employees are given the proper training and they're given the opportunity to provide positive input, and then that there's feedback from a standpoint of their ideas are put into place. They're going to see it. They're going to buy into it, and they'll be part of the entire process. Okay.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much, John, for your time today and all of this really helpful information. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And again, you can visit our website to stay up to date on other upcoming programming. Again, that's northmetrosbdc.com. And we wish you all a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you, everybody.